Trouble mounts for Andrew Cuomo as a Republican-led House panel referred the former New York governor to the Justice Department for a potential prosecution. Cuomo is accused of allegedly lying to Congress about his involvement in a state COVID report on nursing home deaths. The House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic said in a referral that Cuomo, quote, knowingly and willfully made false statements to shield himself and avoid accountability.
Now, a spokesperson for Cuomo, Richard Azzopardi, said, quote, the committee lied in their referral, just as they have been lying to the public and the press. This taxpayer-funded farce is an illegal use of Congress's investigative authority, end quote. The referral comes at a pivotal moment as Cuomo is viewed as a potential candidate in next year's New York City mayoral elections, especially given the current mayor's difficulties in that respect. Andrew Cuomo resigned as the New York governor in August 2021. That came amid sexual harassment allegations. Those are allegations that he denies. So, Amber, this is an interesting one. I mean, obviously, Andrew Cuomo is still a major figure in Democratic politics, though he doesn't hold any particular power at this point in time. The suggestion or the reason he's being referred specifically is that he apparently testified behind closed doors that he had no role in this report. And it subsequently emerged that there were emails from his staff referring to edits that he wanted making in earlier drafts. So, setting any sort of partisan leanings aside, it seems like he didn't tell the truth, right?
Yeah, it certainly get that impression from the evidence that this subcommittee has released. They have a transcript from this testimony that he gave where they asked him specifically, were you involved in the drafting of this report in any capacity? He replies flatly, no. And then they have these emails. Hi, governor's edits are attached for your review. The smaller text in the beginning is from your original document. He replaced your paragraph on page 3, beginning with, and then there's a couple of other emails as well. And then I think there's also draft history in the document that suggests that he had edited it by hand. So it looks like they have him pretty dead to rights. Of course, the question is if the DOJ will take the case up.
Right, and also, you know, whether Cuomo has some sort of exculpatory evidence. So far, his spokesperson is saying that he said he didn't recall because he didn't remember it. You rightly pointed out there was an answer that did not seem like I don't recall. It seemed like a flat no.
Yeah, there's even a period after it.
Yeah. When there's not much wiggle room there, really, you know, where the actual answer appears to be yes. I also think with Cuomo, it is really interesting just the way the trajectory of how he has been viewed has changed. Because I remember certainly in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, he was firstly raised up as a kind of almost heroic figure, particularly by liberals. He was regarded as a counterpoint to then President Trump in terms of what he was saying. And then it emerged that there had been this move or policy of reintroducing older people who had COVID into nursing homes. And it ended up about 15,000 nursing home residents died during the pandemic of COVID-19. It seems in retrospect a terrible mistake. I suppose Cuomo would say we didn't know then what we know now. That's true to a degree, but even before all the sexual harassment stuff, which he denies, there has been this like enormous fall from grace on this particular topic.
Exactly, and what always struck me from his removal from office, or his resignation, I guess you could say, forced resignation effectively, was that the nursing home scandal never came up during that process. It was only after he actually left office and the select committee started looking into what involvement he had in that policy decision and then the editing of the report that undercounted the nursing home deaths. Because for people who don't know what that means, basically there were 2 versions of the report, one of which included people who died in the nursing home and also were in the nursing home when they got COVID and later died in a hospital. And they wanted to exclude the number of people who got COVID in the nursing home and got so sick they had to go to the hospital and passed away, which obviously would give the impression that fewer people had died as a result of the nursing home policy than actually did. Again, this was something that was not really talked about when he left office. It was all about the sexual harassment stuff, which is all totally valid to have issues with his, with some of the evidence that has come out about that and his handling of that situation. But it always troubled me that until now there wasn't a real comeuppance in regards to what I thought was a much more significant scandal.
I think it's going to be interesting because Cuomo is famously ambitious, didn't want to give up office amid those allegations. He would say that the allegations are obviously either false or exaggerated, but he plainly still has political ambitions. We mentioned in the introduction Eric Adams' difficulties, to put it mildly. He's now under indictment as mayor of New York City. Cuomo may have a path back in that respect, but he's going to face enormous questions over this, as well as the sexual harassment allegations, because this COVID stuff looks worse and worse over time. One other thing, just tangentially, I should point out, is we here often have a go at the media. It was the New York Times that brought to light many of the mendacious things that you're referring to in terms of how the state under Cuomo was, to put it bluntly, cooking the books as to who had died and how they had died. And I think that was a very valid journalistic service they did to us all.
Yeah, I would think so. And just one more piece of evidence from this select committee report before we go. They were also asked him if he had any discussions regarding the report being peer reviewed, to which he also said no, with the period at the end of it. And then there is an email from his top aide, Stephanie Benton, indicating that he was indeed involved in the peer review.
Yep.
So he's going to have a hard time wriggling out of this one, I think.
He is, although notably no Democrats signed on to this referral that is has no legal power, but is suggesting that charges be looked at for lying to Congress. So I wonder, does that sort of presage Democrats getting in line behind him?
It suggests that for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they would be happy to have Mayor Adams out of the picture because he's been inconvenient to them in a lot of ways. He hasn't done a good job of cleaning up New York City's crime problem, and I'm sure they don't love that he is criticizing openly the migrant crisis at the southern border.
No, I'm sure they don't. It's interesting with Cuomo, though. I mean, New York City is obviously pretty progressive. There's been some arguments that maybe Trump will get more votes than we might expect this November. But if you're going to be New York mayor, you generally need to appeal to Manhattan and Brooklyn progressives. And Andrew Cuomo has never had that warm a relationship. I mean, he's seen, I suppose, as the sort of Clinton/corporate wing of the Democratic Party. He's had quite a few ill-tempered exchanges with people on the left. So while he has some defenders among the people immediately kind of cloistered around him, he has quite a lot of enemies on the left of the Democratic Party and in the progressive movement as well as on the right.
Yeah, and I've said this before on the show, but I think it bears repeating. First of all, to your point, Cynthia Nixon, of course, mounted a challenge against him from the left in his re-election bid. But what people expect from a large city mayor, whether it's New York or Chicago, maybe San Francisco, they kind of anticipate there's going to be a little bit of corruption, there's going to be a little bit of slimy behavior, but they want someone in there who's going to get stuff done and focus on the city, and if a contract goes to a friend, okay, no big deal, we get it. But I think the nursing home scandal goes far beyond those sort of little quibbles over whether or not they're spending money exactly quite the right way, because this was a direct impact on the people of New York City, their loved ones who passed away due to a completely boneheaded policy that unfortunately was repeated in some other states, but not all. Some were wise enough to prevent that from happening. I don't think this is the sort of like, all shucks, my mayor's a little corrupt, but you know the garbage trucks come at the same time every Thursday.
Right.
This is far beyond that.
No, it is. I mean, partly because it is literally a life and death issue,
Exactly.
But the other thing is, to your point, it's actually about core competency, and there have been really serious questions around that in the management of this crisis, of course, but the fear being that that kind of incompetence could replicate itself further down the line. So there we go.
All right, we are going to see if the DOJ picks it up. In the meantime, we're going to cover more on Rising right after this.